Go the Distance, Chapter 10. A Fateful Choice. Back on Phil's Island. Meg knew one thing for certain. This quest was beyond cruel. It was vindictive. Hera, it seemed, was poised to be the mother-in-law from hell. If Meg even made it that far. Athena and Phil stared at her, waiting for her to say something. Do I go to the underworld to save the soul of the woman Aegeus left me for? Or do I refuse Hera and make an enemy of one of the most powerful gods on Mount Olympus? Great options here. You okay there, Red? Phil asked, looking worried. Athena continued to stare at her. No doubt she would report everything back to Hera. Meg could just picture the gods sitting around on a cloud laughing over her predicament. The mortal will never survive, they'd say. You're so clever, Hera. Well, she wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Meg had two options, and while neither sounded particularly appealing, the thought of backing down from the quest had left a bad taste in her mouth. She might have been a lot of things, but she was not a coward. She thought back to something Hercules had said to her a few months earlier, when they'd stolen away. Her to secretly do Hades' bidding, and get close to the would-be god from Phil. You know what I love about you, Meg? Hercules had said. You're not a quitter. They'd been lying on a cliff overlooking the ocean for what turned out to be hours, speaking earnestly with his sweet boy, getting caught up with his observations. She was breaking rules all over the place, but for the first time in a long time she didn't care. There was something about this wonder boy, as she had grown fond of calling him, that drew her to him like a moth to a hunky flame. What makes you think that? You hardly know me. He brushed a piece of hair out of her eyes. You could have let me use my strength to get you out of that mess with Nicias, he said, referring to that river god through whom they met. But you wanted to fight your way out instead. I recall you calling me ma'am, she said pointedly, and his ears turning bright pink. But you're right. I had things handled till you came along. I like a challenge. It's more than that, Meg, Hercules said softly. It's the way you talk, move, act. You're a go-getter. You won't take no for an answer. Sometimes I think I need to be more like you. Meg felt a twinge of guilt. If Hercules knew who she was working for, he'd feel differently. Now standing in front of Athena, Meg recalled Hercules' words in a different light. He'd said he wanted to be more like her. Did that mean she was worthy of being a god too? Could be. Maybe this was her chance to finally figure out what to do with her life. She'd lost her mother, had lost Aegeus, had given up her soul, and had been through hell and back, and yet she was still breathing, and now Hera was giving her yet another chance. She might have been less than thrilled at the idea of helping Katerina and Aegeus, but she still wanted to prove that she could take whatever the gods threw at her. This quest was about more than just having an opportunity to be with Hercules. It was about proving to herself that she was strong enough to face a challenge as daunting as this one through the end, and to see what she could become on the other side of it. Meg could feel a new sensation coursing through her veins, one she hadn't felt in a while. Determination. Tell Hera I'll do it, she said to Athena as Phil gaped at her in surprise. She'd expect nothing less, Athena said simply. But I have a question first, Meg asked. What is it about Katerina that makes her worthy of another spin around the earth? Red, people don't usually go to ask the gods those kinds of things, Phil whispered, a bleat escaping his lips before he could stop it. Just the sound of Katerina's name on her tongue made Meg taste bile. She might have moved on to new and better, if complicated, relationship, but whatever Meg pictured the woman with her milky white skin, wispy blonde hair, and tiny laugh, her gut still ached at the injustice of it all. I feel like I have a right to know, Meg said, looking at Athena. I gave up my soul for a man, which I'll admit was a dumb move, but then he fell for this woman in less time than the sun revolves around the earth, and Hera wants me to save her? Why? Athena moved toward Meg, standing so close that their noses were almost touching. Power radiated off her. Listen to the satyr. You mortal have no right to ask such questions of a god, she said, her voice low and pulsing with anger. Meg tried not to look afraid. She held her breath. Athena's face softened ever so slightly. But considering how you found my flute, I will forgive this one transgression. I suggest you focus on your journey. The underworld is a large place, and you don't have much time." Meg sighed. Even if she wanted to save Katerina, the sheer vastness of the underworld was a problem. It was made up of 3 realms, with most people resting in the vast abyssal meadows. The worst of the worst were in the Tartarus, and the most revered were in Essalam. There was no way Katerina was living in paradise, which meant she was in one of the other 2 places, and they were tricky to navigate, even with a guide. Plus, there were, of course, the relevant rules of the underworld, that mortals couldn't enter or leave, and that Hades never gave up souls once they were there. Meg's debt to the god seemed to be a gray area that had made her exempt at the time, but Katerina was already deceased. Getting her out and back to the land of the living was impossible. Plus, Meg was supposed to pull it off on a deadline. "How am I supposed to find someone I've never met?" Meg asked, changing tack. "You will start your journey by visiting Aegeus and learning all you can about his wife," Athena replied. His wife. Meg tried to brush aside a sudden chill. So the 2 of them have gotten married. And now she not only had to confront Aegeus, she needed to listen to him gush about Katerina, his wife? This seemed unusually cruel. "You will find him in Athens, near a bluff, much like this one. He lives on a road anchored by an olive grove, in a humble home near the sea." "I know the place," Meg said. The olive grove had been her and Aegeus's favorite spot in Athens. They would sit at the top of the bluff and play music and talk about the house they'd one day build there together, the one that would replace the tiny home they shared at the bottom of the hill. "Well, now that we all know what Red here has got to do, I guess we'll be getting back to my retirement. Good luck, kid." Phil started to scoot backward toward his house. Athena shifted her gaze, glaring while her owl hooted. "Where do you think you're going, satyr?" Phil stopped, balancing on one hind leg. "You don't expect me to go on this quest with her, do you?" Athena didn't answer. He laughed nervously, and a bleat came out. "You might have heard I've done a lot for Mount Olympus already, and am now just trying to enjoy my retirement." Meg moaned. Phil was the least of her problems. "Fine by me, go. I don't need you anyway. We're not exactly the closest of friends," she told Athena, who looked mildly amused. "If you'll just tell me how to get to the entrance of the underworld, I'm sure I can get there on my own." Phil bleated. "Oh yeah, sure. Like you took care of that Impusa on your own." "I did take care of that Impusa," Meg snapped. "You barely survived, and I healed your injuries," Phil said, eyeing Athena. "Why, you arrogant little goat boy," Meg seethed. Phil turned bright red. "Did you just call me goat boy? Well, Stop!" Athena thundered, and they did as they were told. "Philoctetes, you are skilled in helping heroes on their journeys, so you will take Megara to the entrance of the underworld via the river Archeon. Once you reach the river Styx, Charon will take Megara to the land of the living, to the land of the dead. That is an order." Phil's face dropped. "But..." Athena lifted her chin. "You will leave this island together at dawn." "Dawn? You expect me to help this one find the underworld when she has no previous experience with quests or fighting monsters?" Phil's face was scrunched. Athena didn't blink. "Yes." "We're doomed," Phil said. "Great," Meg said under her breath at the same time. Athena strode forward, stopping to move a broken statue with her foot. "I suggest you both thank the gods for your gifts and fill your bodies with nourishment. Gather your supplies. Learn what you can from one another. This journey will not be easy." "Tell me about it." Phil scratched his chest and sighed. "I guess I'll start dinner." He pushed his way past some of the goats. "Coming through." "Maybe I should help him?" Meg suggested. "No," Athena replied, surprising her. "Let us walk." Meg stared at the god, who had turned and started heading toward the edge of the island. She quickly followed. Then they reached the bluff overlooking the water. Athena stopped, holding out the double-reed flute. "Play it for me." Meg stared at the flute wearily, its brass gleaming in the fading light of the day. She had no desire to touch it, but was not about to further insult the god by refusing. She took the instrument from Athena's outstretched hands and felt the weight of it. Her flute was a piece of art, so carefully crafted, so different from the rusty one Meg had owned, and yet its notes would, in theory, be the same. Meg just didn't want to hear them. "Is something the matter?" Athena asked. "No," Meg said quickly. But the truth was she was afraid that the mere act of returning to this instrument would fill her with an aching sadness for the life she had once traded. But she couldn't deny Athena. She took a deep breath, then placed her mouth over the double opening of the reeds. Closing her eyes, she started with the first few notes of a familiar song almost instinctively, "The Plight of the Lily." The sound that emitted from the pipe was different from the one she was used to, but that seemed to be a good thing. It helped her separate the tune from her memories. When she was finished, she was relieved to hand the flute back to Athena. Athena clapped, the wind blowing through her glowing hair. "Brava, Megara. You didn't miss a single note, and yet I still can't help thinking something was missing from your performance." "I'm sorry?" Meg faltered. "Don't get me wrong. You are clearly a strong musician, child. One of the muses would be proud of, to be sure. But a true artist feels their notes in their soul." She looked at Meg. "You clearly have lost that desire along the way. You do not play as you once did." Meg frowned, understanding dawning on her. "You've heard me play before?" Athena smiled wanly. "At the concert in Athens, when true musicians play in honor of their gods, we come to listen from time to time. You were superb that night. Such a shame how lost you have become." Meg felt her cheeks color. "Perhaps it is because this is not my flute. I am used to my own." Athena turned toward her. "And where is that one?" Meg avoided eye contact. "In the underworld." It was a half-truth, at least. "I see." Athena turned away for a moment and looked out over the darkened sea. "Then you will take mine with you on your journey." She held the flute out to Meg again. "I couldn't," Meg said. She didn't want to be responsible for the god's instrument, and all this talk about music had made her even wearier. She had no interest in playing it again. "You've been without it for so long." Athena smiled. "I suspect it will find its way back to me in the future, but for now it will aid you more than it does me." She turned her head to the side. "Besides, I rather don't like to play the thing myself. It contorts my face in a way that is less than appealing." Athena held the flute out to her again, and this time Meg took it, knowing it was pointless to argue. "Thank you," she said. "I will care for it as if it was my own." "I can see the thickness in your skin, Megara. You are tough, courageous, proud. I will assist you however I can." Meg had heard the tales of Athena helping those on heroic endeavors, but she'd never imagined she'd be worthy of such a thing. "Thank you," she said again with more feeling. "But you must promise to open your mind and listen," Athena went on. "That is the best advice I can give you. You can complete your task if you believe you can. Don't fall victim to distractions." Meg nodded. Athena sounded like her mother. The only person she would be able to rely on the underworld was herself. "Got it. Sometimes your head will lead, and other times it will be your heart." An image of Hercules popped into Meg's head, her hand instinctively going to the satchel where the orchid was safely tucked away. "Remember, the sands of time cannot be stopped," Athena warned, her voice deeper than it was before. "If you lose your way, you'll never see the light of day again." Meg wrapped her burned arms around her chest. The wind seemed to pick up as the night took hold, sending another chill through her. "Understood." "You must ask Aegeus about Katerina," Athena insisted. And Meg felt her stomach begin to churn again. "What he knows about this woman could be the key on saving both your futures, Megara. Good luck." She squeezed her hands. "I'll be watching." And then Athena faded away as the sun began to sink into the sea.